Welcome to the Numis Explorer, where every ordinary-looking coin can hide an extraordinary story, and today we are diving into the fascinating mystery of the 1985 D quarter dollar, a coin that may look completely normal at first glance but can become incredibly interesting when unusual minting errors, striking mistakes, condition, rarity, and provenance enter the picture. And before we begin, make sure you stay until the end because the most important part of this story is understanding what could actually make a 1985 D quarter valuable rather than simply assuming that every coin from this year is worth a fortune. The 1985 D Washington quarter was produced at the Denver Mint and millions of examples entered circulation, which means the ordinary version generally does not carry an extraordinary value, but the world of coin collecting changes dramatically when a coin contains a genuine mint error or an unusual production variety. Claims of a 1985 D quarter being worth $146 million should be treated as an extraordinary hypothetical or sensational valuation rather than an established market price for a normal example, because a coin does not automatically become worth millions simply because it is old, has a Denver Mint mark, or contains a minor imperfection. However, the possibility of discovering a genuinely dramatic error is exactly what makes searching through old coins so exciting. Imagine finding a 1985 D quarter that appears different from every other quarter in your collection, perhaps with a major off-center strike, an unusual planchet problem, a dramatic die error, a wrong metal strike, a broad strike, or another unmistakable minting anomaly. These are the kinds of characteristics that can attract serious attention from collectors, specialists, dealers, and professional grading services. One of the first things collectors should examine is the strike itself. An off-center strike happens when the planchet is not properly positioned between the dies at the moment of striking, leaving part of the design missing and creating a noticeable blank area around one side of the coin. A dramatic off-center error can be much more desirable than a tiny displacement, especially when the date and mint mark remain clearly visible. If a 1985 D quarter had a major off-center strike while retaining the complete date and mint mark, collectors could consider it far more interesting than an ordinary circulated example. Another possibility is a broad strike, which can occur when a coin is struck outside the retaining collar, allowing the metal to spread beyond its normal shape. A broad-struck quarter may have an unusual appearance around the edges and can be especially fascinating when the design remains strong and the error is clearly attributable to the minting process. Then there are clipped planchets, where part of the metal blank is missing before the coin is struck. A genuine curved clip can create a distinctive crescent-shaped missing section, while other types of clips can produce different appearances. Collectors look for characteristics that demonstrate the defect occurred before or during striking rather than being caused after the coin left the mint. This distinction is extremely important because damage caused by dropping, bending, cutting, grinding, drilling, or other post-mint activity generally does not create the same numismatic value as a genuine mint error. Another area that can create excitement is die doubling. A true double die variety occurs during the die-making process and can produce noticeable doubling on parts of the design, such as letters, numbers, or other details. But collectors need to be careful because mechanical doubling, die deterioration, machine damage, and ordinary wear can sometimes look similar to genuine double die characteristics. A valuable discovery therefore requires careful examination rather than simply seeing something that looks doubled under a phone camera. The 1985 D quarter can also be interesting when it comes to unusual die cracks, die breaks, and cut errors. A die crack occurs when a crack develops in the die and leaves a raised line on struck coins, while a major die break can produce a much larger raised area where part of the die has broken away. If a significant cut appears in an unusual location and is clearly connected to a die break, collectors may find the piece especially interesting. The size, location, visibility, and rarity of the error can all influence desirability. Another possibility that captures the imagination of collectors is a wrong planchet error. This is where a coin is struck on a planchet intended for another denomination or composition. A genuine 1985 D quarter struck on an incorrect planchet could be extremely unusual, but proving such a claim would require professional examination because the composition, weight, diameter, thickness, and other physical characteristics must make sense. This is also where professional authentication becomes essential. A scale accurate to at least hundredths of a gram can provide an initial clue, while precise measurements and professional metallurgical testing can provide much stronger evidence. A quarter with an unusual color is not automatically a wrong planchet error. Environmental exposure, chemicals, plating, cleaning, heat, corrosion, and other forms of post-mint alteration can change a coin's appearance. The same warning applies to unusual edges. A coin with a strange edge could have suffered damage after leaving the mint, so collectors should not immediately assume that every unusual-looking edge is a rare mint mistake. Another major factor is condition. Even if two coins share the same year, mint mark, and error type, their values can be dramatically different depending on preservation. A coin with sharp details, strong luster, minimal contact marks, and excellent surfaces can attract more attention than a heavily circulated example. Professional grading can help establish authenticity and condition, and certification from a respected grading service can give buyers greater confidence when a coin is potentially valuable. But even a high grade by itself does not magically turn a common 1985 D quarter into a $1 million coin. The combination of rarity, demand, authenticity, condition, and documented significance is what matters. Provenance can also play an important role in extraordinary cases. If an unusual coin has a documented history showing where it was discovered, how it was authenticated, and how it has changed hands over time, that documentation can strengthen collector confidence. Auction records can also provide clues about what comparable error coins have actually sold for. This is why sensational claims such as a $146 million valuation should always be approached carefully. A headline can grab attention, but serious collectors need evidence. Was the coin authenticated? Was it graded? Was there a public auction? Did a verified buyer actually pay that amount? Is the supposed value based on a real transaction or merely an internet estimate? These questions are critical because a claimed value and an actual sale price are not necessarily the same thing. If you happen to own a 1985 D quarter, the best approach is not to assume that it is automatically worth millions, but instead to inspect it carefully for genuine characteristics that could separate it from ordinary examples. Start by checking the date and Denver mint mark, then inspect both sides under good lighting. Look closely at the lettering, numbers, portrait, eagle, rim, and edge. Compare the coin with a normal 1985 D quarter if possible. Look for major differences in shape, alignment, missing design areas, unusual metal appearance, or clear evidence of a striking anomaly. Avoid cleaning the coin because aggressive cleaning can permanently damage the surfaces and reduce collector appeal. Also avoid attempting to straighten, polish, scrape, or alter the coin in an effort to make an error more visible. If something truly unusual is discovered, preserve the coin exactly as it is and seek an opinion from a reputable numismatic expert or professional grading service. The biggest lesson from the 1985 D quarter story is that value comes from rarity and evidence, not simply from a dramatic number attached to a headline. A normal quarter can be worth only its face value or a modest premium depending on condition, while a genuinely rare and authenticated mint error can command substantially more. In exceptional cases, rare coins can attract intense bidding from collectors who want something few other people possess. But extraordinary prices require extraordinary evidence. The possibility of a hidden treasure is what makes coin collecting so addictive. A quarter sitting in an old jar, a forgotten collection, a family box, or a group of coins purchased at a sale might look ordinary until one tiny manufacturing detail changes the entire story. The 1985 D quarter is therefore worth examining not because every example is a $146 million treasure, but because it provides a perfect reminder that mint errors and unusual varieties can sometimes transform an ordinary denomination into a highly collectible piece. So if you have 1985 D quarters at home, don't simply throw them into a spending pile before checking them carefully. Compare their appearance, examine the edges, check the weight, look for genuine striking abnormalities, and most importantly, learn the difference between a real mint error and damage that happened after the coin left the mint. The more you learn, the better your chances become of recognizing something genuinely unusual. And who knows, Perhaps the next fascinating discovery could be sitting unnoticed inside an old collection, waiting for someone with enough patience and knowledge to recognize it. If you enjoyed this journey into the mysterious world of the 1985 quarter dollar and want more stories about rare coins, mint errors, valuable varieties, and the hidden possibilities inside everyday American currency, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the Numis Explorer, turn on notifications, and share this video with another collector. Because sometimes the most exciting treasure isn't buried underground, it may already be sitting in your pocket, your coin jar, or an old collection, waiting to be discovered. Next, 1980p quarter dollar coin. Today we are taking a fascinating closer look at the 1980p quarter dollar, a coin that may appear completely ordinary at first glance but can become extremely interesting when genuine mint errors, unusual varieties, exceptional condition, and rarity enter the picture. So stay with us, because the real mystery is not whether every 1980p quarter is worth millions, but what kinds of unusual mistakes or discoveries could potentially make one example dramatically more valuable than its face value. The 1980p Washington quarter was produced at the Philadelphia Mint and many examples entered circulation, meaning an ordinary circulated specimen is generally not a multi-million-dollar coin, but collectors know that coins struck during the minting process can occasionally develop unusual characteristics that make individual examples much more desirable. Claims suggesting that a 1980p quarter is worth $140 million should be viewed as sensational or hypothetical unless supported by verified authentication and an actual documented transaction, because an enormous claimed value is not the same as a confirmed market price. Still, the possibility of finding a spectacular mint error is what makes searching old coins so exciting. One of the first things to examine on a 1980p quarter is the overall strike and alignment. A dramatic off-center strike can happen when a blank planchet shifts out of proper position during striking, leaving part of the design missing and creating a noticeable area of blank metal. The greater the displacement, especially when the date and other important identifying details remain visible, the more interesting the error can become to collectors. A quarter that is only slightly off-center may have limited additional value, while an extreme off-center example can be far more desirable if it is genuine and authenticated. Another possibility is a broad strike, which can occur when a coin is struck without proper containment by the collar. Instead of maintaining the standard quarter shape, the metal can spread outward, creating an unusual appearance around the rim. A genuine broad-struck 1980p quarter can be fascinating because the unusual shape results from the minting process rather than damage caused after the coin entered circulation. Collectors may also look for clipped planchets. A clipped planchet occurs when a portion of the metal blank is missing before the coin is struck, potentially leaving a curved or straight missing section along the edge. However, identifying a true mint clip requires careful examination because damaged coins can sometimes imitate genuine clipping. The shape of the missing area, the metal flow, the rim characteristics, and other diagnostic features can help determine whether the anomaly occurred at the mint. Another major category of errors involves doubled dies. A genuine double die variety develops during the creation of the die and can cause parts of the design to appear doubled. Collectors often examine letters, numbers, and other design elements for unusual separation or repeated impressions. But this is where knowledge becomes extremely important because not every form of doubling is a valuable doubled die. Mechanical doubling, die deterioration, strike-related effects, and post-mint damage can produce appearances that look impressive to an inexperienced collector but have little or no premium value. A genuine variety needs to be carefully compared with known references and, when necessary, authenticated by experts. The 1980p quarter can also be examined for die cracks, die breaks, and cut errors. A die crack can leave a raised line on the struck coin, while a major die break can produce a much larger raised area where part of the die has broken away. A substantial cut connected to a broken portion of the die can be particularly interesting. The location, size, clarity, and rarity of the feature all influence how collectors might view it. Another exciting possibility is a wrong planchet strike. Imagine a quarter design being struck on a blank intended for another denomination. Such a coin could have unusual weight, diameter, thickness, or composition, and if authenticated, a genuine wrong planchet error can be highly collectible. But this is also one of the areas where caution is essential. A strange color does not automatically mean a wrong metal planchet. Coins can change color because of environmental exposure, chemicals, heat, corrosion, cleaning, or other post-mint conditions. Likewise, a coin that feels unusually light or heavy should be investigated rather than immediately declared a major mint error. Accurate measurements can provide important clues, but professional examination is the safest route when the potential value is substantial. The edge of the quarter is another area collectors should never ignore. Examine whether the edge appears normal, unusually broad, damaged, or inconsistent with other examples. Edge errors can sometimes be connected to unusual striking conditions, but many strange edges are simply the result of circulation damage. A genuine mint error should have characteristics consistent with the production process. This distinction between mint-made errors and post-mint damage is one of the most important lessons in coin collecting. A coin can be scratched, bent, drilled, polished, chemically altered, discolored, or otherwise damaged after leaving the mint, and these changes generally do not create the kind of premium associated with authentic mint errors. Condition also plays a major role in determining desirability. A 1980p quarter with sharp details, strong original surfaces, attractive luster, and minimal marks can be much more desirable than a heavily worn example, particularly if it also contains a legitimate error. Collectors and grading professionals examine factors such as surface preservation, strike quality, luster, contact marks, scratches, and overall appearance. Professional grading can help establish the condition of a coin and may also provide authentication for a significant error. If someone believes they have an extraordinary 1980p quarter, professional evaluation is much safer than relying on an internet comment or an unverified social media post. The same principle applies to claims about astronomical values. A coin being described online as worth $140 million does not mean someone has actually paid $140 million for it. Serious collectors look for documented auction results, credible grading information, authentication, provenance, and comparable sales. A genuine market value is supported by evidence, not simply by a number repeated in a video title or social media post. This is especially important because sensational coin stories often mix real error categories with unrealistic price claims. The exciting part is that genuine errors do exist, and some can be worth dramatically more than ordinary coins, but the exact value depends on the specific error, rarity, condition, demand, and authenticity. If you have a 1980p quarter, begin by identifying the coin correctly and then compare it carefully with a normal example. Look at Washington's portrait, the inscriptions, the date, the rim, the eagle design, and the overall shape. Check whether the design appears shifted, doubled, incomplete, unusually spread, or struck on an unusual-looking planchet. Inspect the edge and weigh the coin using an accurate scale if something appears suspicious. Never clean the coin in an attempt to make an error easier to see. Cleaning can permanently alter the surfaces and may reduce its desirability. Never bend, scrape, polish, or modify the coin either. If you find something that appears genuinely unusual, preserve it in its current condition and consult a reputable coin dealer, numismatic expert, or professional grading service. Another possibility worth considering is a previously overlooked variety. Sometimes collectors discover that coins sharing the same date and mint mark can have subtle differences caused by die characteristics or production changes. These differences may not make every example valuable, but they can create areas of interest for specialists. The more knowledge a collector develops, the easier it becomes to recognize unusual characteristics that others might overlook. That is why coin collecting is not simply about finding an old coin and searching for a giant price tag. It is about learning how coins were produced, understanding the minting process, identifying genuine abnormalities, studying condition, and knowing what the collecting community actually considers desirable. The 1980p quarter is a perfect example of this mystery. Most examples may be ordinary, but a remarkable mint-made error can completely change the conversation. A dramatic off-center strike, major broadstrike, authentic clipped planchet, significant die break, genuine double die characteristic, wrong planchet strike, or another documented production anomaly could make a particular coin far more interesting than its face value. And that is why collectors continue checking old jars, inherited collections, rolls of coins, estate sale finds, and forgotten boxes. Somewhere among ordinary pieces, an unusual example could be waiting to be recognized. But remember, the goal should be discovery and verification rather than automatically believing every extraordinary price claim. If a 1980p quarter is genuinely rare, the evidence should be strong enough to stand up to Next 1998D quarter dollar coin. Today we are taking a fascinating look at the 1998D Washington quarter dollar, a coin that may appear completely ordinary at first glance but can become much more interesting when genuine mint errors, unusual varieties, exceptional condition, and rarity are involved. So stay with us because the real mystery is not that every 1998D quarter is worth $135 million. But rather what kinds of authentic errors and unusual minting mistakes could potentially make a particular example extremely valuable. To collectors. The 1998D Washington quarter was struck at the Denver Mint and many examples entered circulation, so an ordinary circulated coin is generally not a multi-million-dollar rarity. Claims that a 1998D quarter can cost $135 million should be treated as sensational or hypothetical unless there is credible documentation showing authentication and an actual sale at that level. However, that does not mean every 1998D quarter should be ignored. Coin collecting is filled with examples of ordinary-looking pieces that become highly desirable when they contain legitimate mint-made errors or unusual varieties. The first thing to understand is that a mint error is very different from ordinary damage. A genuine error occurs during the manufacturing process at the mint, while damage can happen after the coin enters circulation. This distinction is extremely important when searching for valuable quarters. One of the most exciting possibilities to look for on a 1998D quarter is a major off-center strike. This type of error can occur when the blank planchet is not correctly positioned between the dies when the coin is struck. Instead of producing a perfectly centered design, the resulting quarter may show a large area of blank metal on one side with part of the design pushed toward the opposite edge. The degree of off-center striking matters greatly. A tiny shift may not be especially valuable, while a dramatic off-center strike that still clearly shows the date and mint mark can be much more desirable. Collectors generally appreciate errors that are obvious, dramatic, and clearly connected to the minting process. Another possibility is a broad strike. During normal production, the collar helps control the shape and diameter of the coin as it is struck. If the collar fails to properly contain the planchet during striking, the metal can spread outward, creating a coin with an unusual shape or enlarged appearance. A genuine broad-struck 1998D quarter could attract collector interest, especially if the design remains strong and the error is clearly visible. Another fascinating category is a clipped planchet. A clipped planchet occurs when a portion of the metal blank is missing before the coin is struck. The finished quarter can show a distinctive curved or straight missing section along its edge. But collectors should be cautious because a damaged quarter can sometimes look like a clipped planchet. Genuine clips usually show characteristic metal flow around the affected area, and professional examination can help determine whether the missing section happened during production or was created afterward. The quarter should never be cut, bent, filed, or otherwise altered to imitate an error. Another possibility that attracts enormous attention is doubling. Collectors often search for doubled letters, numbers, or design details, but not every visible form of doubling represents a valuable double die variety. True double dies are created during the die-making process and can produce recognizable separation or duplication in parts of the design. Mechanical doubling can happen differently and may create a flatter, shelf-like appearance that generally does not carry the same premium. Die deterioration and ordinary wear can also create confusing visual effects. That is why a suspected double die 1998D quarter should be compared carefully with established references and, if necessary, examined by a professional. The date, lettering, portrait, and other design elements should be inspected under magnification rather than relying on a quick glance. Another potential source of value is a significant die crack or die break. Coin dies experience tremendous pressure during production, and damaged dies can sometimes leave raised lines, unusual raised areas, or larger irregular features on coins struck afterward. A small die crack may have little additional value, but a dramatic die break or cut can be much more interesting, particularly if it is unusual and clearly connected to a damaged die. The location and size of the feature matter, and collectors often compare examples to determine whether the same die characteristic appears repeatedly. A genuine die variety or error can become especially desirable when very few examples are known. The edge of a 1998 D quarter should also be examined carefully. Collectors can look for unusual edge characteristics, incomplete reading, abnormal shape, or other features that might indicate a production problem. However, strange-looking edges are not automatically mint errors. Coins can become damaged by machines, coin-counting equipment, impacts, squeezing, grinding, or other forms of post-mint activity. A genuine mint-made error should have physical characteristics consistent with how coins are actually produced. Another possibility is a wrong planchet error, and this is where the story can become particularly fascinating. If a quarter design were struck on a planchet intended for another denomination, the resulting coin could have unusual weight, thickness, diameter, or composition. A genuine wrong planchet 1998 D quarter would be an unusual numismatic discovery, but such claims require serious verification. A strange color alone is not enough. Environmental exposure, chemicals, heat, corrosion, plating, or other post-mint alterations can produce unusual colors and surfaces. A collector should therefore consider weight and dimensions together with appearance rather than assuming that a different color automatically means a different metal. Condition is another major factor that can influence collector interest. A 1998 D quarter with sharp details, strong original luster, clean surfaces, and minimal contact marks can be more desirable than a heavily circulated example. If the coin also has a legitimate error, preservation becomes even more important. Professional grading can establish a standardized condition assessment and, depending on the service, authenticate unusual error characteristics. For an ordinary quarter, professional certification may not be necessary, but for a potentially significant error, authentication can be extremely valuable because it gives collectors greater confidence that the unusual feature is genuine. This brings us back to the dramatic $135 million claim. A headline can say a coin is worth millions, but serious numismatics requires evidence. Was the coin authenticated? Was it professionally graded? Is there a documented auction record? Did a verified buyer actually pay the claimed amount? Are there comparable sales of similar errors? Without answers to these questions, an enormous valuation should be considered speculation rather than established market value. The actual value of a rare coin depends on many factors, including rarity, type of error, condition, demand, authenticity, eye appeal, and documented market history. Sometimes an error that sounds impressive may have little value if it is common or caused by post-mint damage, while another error that appears subtle can be highly collectible because it is extremely rare and well documented. This is why learning the minting process is so important. Understanding how planchets are produced, how dies strike coins, how collars control shape, and how errors can develop gives collectors the ability to separate genuine discoveries from ordinary imperfections. If you have a 1998 D quarter at home, begin by examining both sides carefully. Look at the date, mint mark, portrait, lettering, eagle, rim, and overall alignment. Compare the coin with a normal 1998 D quarter if you have one available. Look for unusual displacement, missing design areas, abnormal shape, strong doubling, die cracks, die breaks, unusual planchet characteristics, or other features that appear impossible to explain through ordinary wear. Then inspect the edge. If the coin looks unusually thin, thick, wide, narrow, or otherwise different, measure it rather than guessing. A reliable scale can provide useful information, while professional testing can provide much stronger evidence. Most importantly, do not clean the coin. Cleaning can leave scratches, remove original surfaces, and significantly affect collector appeal. Do not polish it, scrape it, bend it, or attempt to improve the appearance of a suspected error. Preserve the coin exactly as you found it and seek a reputable numismatic opinion if the characteristics appear genuinely unusual. Another important possibility is that the coin may have a variety that is not immediately obvious. Specialists sometimes study small differences in dies and production characteristics, and some varieties can become collectible because of their scarcity and recognition among dedicated collectors. A coin does not have to be dramatically damaged or obviously strange to be interesting. Last 1966 $quarter coin. Today we are exploring the fascinating mystery of the 1966 Washington $quarter, a coin that may look like an ordinary piece of pocket change but can become extremely interesting when genuine mint errors, unusual varieties, rare production mistakes, and exceptional condition are involved. So stay with us because the real excitement is discovering what could make a particular 1966 quarter worth far more than its face value. A claim that a 1966 $quarter costs $125 million should be treated as a sensational or hypothetical valuation unless supported by professional authentication and a documented transaction, because a normal 1966 quarter is not automatically worth millions simply because of its age. However, 1966 is an especially interesting year for collectors because the United States Mint was producing quarters during an important period in American coinage history, and unusual examples can attract attention when they show genuine characteristics created during the minting process. The first thing every collector should understand is the difference between a real mint error and damage that occurred after the coin left the mint. A genuine mint error happens during production, while scratches, bends, dents, chemical discoloration, polishing, drilling, grinding, and other alterations usually happen later and generally do not carry the same collectible premium. One of the most exciting possibilities to investigate on a 1966 quarter is an off-center strike. This occurs when the planchet is not correctly positioned between the dies when the coin is struck, causing the design to shift toward one side and leaving an unusual area of blank metal. A dramatic off-center strike can be especially interesting when the date remains visible and the error is clearly genuine. The greater the displacement, the more visually dramatic the coin may become, although the exact value still depends on rarity, condition, demand, and authentication. Another possibility is a broad strike. During normal striking, the collar helps control the coin's diameter and shape. If the collar fails to contain the planchet correctly, the metal can spread outward when the dies strike it. The result can be a quarter with an unusually wide appearance or an abnormal rim. A genuine broad-struck 1966 quarter could attract collector interest because its unusual shape is directly connected to the minting process. Collectors should also examine the possibility of clipped planchets. A clipped planchet occurs when part of the metal blank is missing before the coin is struck, producing a distinctive missing section around the edge. Curved clips can create a crescent-like appearance, while other types can have different shapes. But this is another area where caution is necessary because coins can be damaged after leaving the mint in ways that imitate genuine clips. Specialists look for characteristics such as metal flow and other diagnostic evidence to determine whether the feature occurred during production. Another major area of interest is double dies. A true double die variety can occur during the creation of a die and may produce noticeable doubling in letters, numbers, or other parts of the design. But not every coin that looks doubled contains a valuable double die. Mechanical doubling, strike movement, die deterioration, and post-mint damage can create confusing appearances. Collectors should therefore inspect suspicious doubling under magnification and compare it with known examples before assuming that it represents a major variety. A genuine and significant double die characteristic can be much more interesting than ordinary machine doubling, especially when it is rare and well documented. The 1966 quarter can also be examined for die cracks and die breaks. A die crack can leave a raised line on the coin because the crack in the die is transferred to the struck piece. As a die becomes more damaged, larger breaks can develop, sometimes producing prominent raised areas or cud-like features. A dramatic die break can be attractive to collectors when it is clearly visible and proven to be connected to a damaged die. Small die cracks may be relatively common and may not carry a large premium, but unusual and substantial die breaks can be more desirable. Another possibility that captures the imagination of collectors is a wrong planchet strike. This occurs when a coin design is struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination or composition. A genuine wrong planchet 1966 quarter could be extremely unusual, especially if the weight, diameter, thickness, and metal composition provide convincing evidence. But unusual color alone is never enough to prove a wrong planchet error. Coins can become dark, bright, golden, reddish, gray, or otherwise unusual because of environmental exposure, chemicals, heat, corrosion, cleaning, or other post-mint processes. Accurate measurements and professional analysis are much more reliable than visual assumptions. The edge of the coin is another important area to examine. A collector can inspect the reading, thickness, shape, and overall edge appearance for abnormalities. However, strange edge characteristics can also result from circulation damage or machine-related damage. A genuine mint error should fit logically with the minting process and display physical characteristics consistent with how coins were manufactured. This is why professional authentication is especially important when a suspected error appears to be extremely valuable. Another factor that can dramatically affect desirability is condition. A 1966 quarter with strong details, attractive surfaces, good luster, and minimal marks can be more desirable than a heavily circulated coin, particularly if it also has a rare mint error. High-grade examples preserved from circulation can attract collectors because surviving in exceptional condition can itself be difficult. However, condition alone does not transform a common coin into a multi-million-dollar rarity. The strongest combinations occur when a coin has genuine rarity, strong collector demand, exceptional preservation, and a documented history of authenticity. This brings us to the dramatic $125 million figure. A number like that can make an exciting headline, but serious collectors need to separate a claimed value from a confirmed market price. If someone says a 1966 quarter is worth $125 million, ask whether the coin has been professionally authenticated, whether it has a recognized grading certification, whether the error has been verified, whether there is a documented auction record, and whether an actual buyer has paid anything close to that amount. Without credible evidence, the figure should be regarded as speculation rather than established value. Real coin values are determined through a combination of rarity, condition, error type, demand, authenticity, eye appeal, and market history. Some errors that look dramatic may be relatively common, while an error that seems subtle can be much more desirable if very few examples exist. That is why education is one of the most valuable tools a collector can have. If you own a 1966 quarter, begin by carefully inspecting both sides. Check the date, Washington's portrait, lettering, eagle, rim, and overall alignment. Look for major displacement, unusual shapes, missing sections, doubled design elements, die cracks, die breaks, and unusual planchet characteristics. Compare your coin with a normal 1966 quarter whenever possible. If the weight seems unusual, use an accurate scale rather than relying on your hand. If the diameter or thickness seems different, measure it carefully. The edge should also be inspected because some unusual production problems become more obvious from the side. Most importantly, do not clean the coin. Cleaning can permanently damage the surfaces and may reduce its collector appeal. Do not polish it, scrape it, bend it, drill it, or attempt to improve a suspected error. If you believe you have found something unusual, preserve it exactly as it is and seek an opinion from a reputable numismatic professional or grading service. Another fascinating possibility is a rare die variety that may not look dramatic at first. Collectors sometimes study small differences created by individual dies, and certain varieties can become collectible because specialists recognize them and because relatively few examples are known. This means that a valuable discovery does not always have to look like a broken or damaged coin. Sometimes the clue can be a small detail in a letter, number, design element, or die characteristic that becomes significant after careful research. The history of the 1966 quarter also makes the date interesting from a broader numismatic perspective. During this period, quarters were being produced as part of the copper-nickel-clad era, and collectors pay attention to composition, planchets, and unusual striking characteristics. This makes it particularly important to understand the difference between a normal coin and an actual composition or planchet error. If a coin appears to have an unusual metal appearance, collectors should investigate rather than assume. A professional examination can determine whether the characteristics are consistent with an actual minting mistake or simply the result of environmental exposure. The excitement of finding a potentially valuable 1966